It's not that I ever ruled out in my head that I would return to the Red Bull family, but yeah, like 4 years ago, I certainly thought it was a long shot. You know what I mean? When everything, let's say when
Daniel Ricciardo has been one of the hottest topics on the grid, and for all the right reasons. After all the drama that's been circulated around Verstappen and Perez and their chemistry being brought to its knees, Ricciardo is the guy that could capitalise on this situation perfectly. The 8-time race winner could turn out to be the perfect example of from zero to hero in just 1 year, and he's well aware of that. That's why he recently spoke about this certain situation, providing information about what his current position as a future Red Bull starting driver is. Now, before we dive deep into this, let's see why Perez and Verstappen are very likely to part ways as teammates. Ever since Brazil, the relationship between Max and Perez has started to deteriorate rapidly. Obviously, the factor that triggered it all was back in Monaco, and while not many of us were aware that Perez's deliberate crash during the qualifying session in order to secure a higher starting position compared to Verstappen had been an actual deliberate move, the Mexican spoke with Horner and Marco later this weekend, admitting his actions. This irritated Verstappen, who continued to tell the team that if he was put in a position to let Perez pass him, he wouldn't do it unless Perez was the faster driver. Now, apart from what he did in Monaco, Perez was the ideal wingman for Verstappen, helping him win the 2021 title and securing the 2022 in Suzuka by putting pressure on Leclerc to lose the P2 position. Still, the two-time world champion holds a massive grudge against Perez, and it seems like he's reached the point of no return. That's why Verstappen took the actions he did in Brazil and partially in Abu Dhabi when he said that it would be massively unfair for him to slow down Leclerc in order for Perez to catch up and pass him, therefore securing the P2 position in the Drivers' Championship. After the season, Perez and Max have reportedly worsened the relationship between them, and now Max is likely to call upon his position and request the team replace Perez with someone else, someone who would be more obedient to him. Well, Red Bull has the perfect guy for him. As if it wasn't enough for them to sign Ricciardo as a reserve driver at the end of the 2022 season, now it seems they're ready to promote the Aussie to the starting spot right next to Verstappen. But how possible is this? And what does Ricciardo have to say about this matter? Well, we have all of these answers in the next part of our video, so don't go anywhere. Obviously, Verstappen doesn't plan to fold under pressure, and when talking about the number 2 role in the team, he said that the driver who's supposed to be the number 2 driver in the team should accept his role and stop living in a fairy tale. To be honest, he did mention Bottas, who, despite winning 10 races with Mercedes, was always in the shadow of the 7-time world champion. Verstappen also said that if a driver doesn't accept that he's not faster than the superior teammate, things could turn out very bad for him and he could lose the seat due to the fairyland world he's living in. These were some crucial shots fired towards Perez, but now it seems like there are lots of trust issues that are being developed between Perez and Verstappen, and they're predicted to spill in 2023. According to David Croft, who is a Sky F1 commentator, there's an irreparable lack of trust between the Red Bull duo, and it seems like we're going to witness some changes sooner rather than later. There has to be trust issues there. You need to be able to trust your team, and as a driver, trust your teammate. Whatever went on in Monaco, and the assumption is that there was something about Checo's crash that wasn't misfortune, shall we say. If it wasn't an act of misfortune, there is a trust issue there. And in the back of your mind, I don't care who you are, you're thinking, will they do that again? I don't see how he gets repaired. On the other hand, his colleague, Natalie Pinkham, added that Red Bull did a good job of covering up the mess between these two drivers by boosting the team morale and with a big photo in front of the garage in Abu Dhabi, but not enough was covered. Verstappen's mother made some derogatory remarks about Perez, which were later deleted but were screenshotted for the rest of history. Now, the question has to be asked, where does Red Bull go from here on? Obviously, they have one great replacement for Perez, one that would be a perfect number 2, and one that wouldn't ask questions and would just obey orders. Ricciardo's career has taken a downhill turn from 2021 on, and one huge reason for that is his lack of form at McLaren. The Woking-based team didn't turn out to be as good as an engagement as Ricciardo had hoped, and now that he's been linked to retiring, being the number 2 driver in the best team on the grid is an offer he'd take with both hands. Although Red Bull's decision to bring back Ricciardo to the team was justified by marketing, it did set off a few alarm bells and posed the question of whether the Austrian team was preparing itself for Plan B if Perez decides that he's not the type of driver that Red Bull wants him to be. After all, the Mexican has all the right reasons to be mad, but the fact that he wasn't able to adapt to the car and its upgrade stands right there, and he lost his groove not just to Verstappen, but also to Mercedes and Ferrari. And if you want to be respected just out of pity, well, then that's on you. But just like Coulthard said, the only one to blame for the problems that Perez is currently going through is Perez himself. It's impossible to say whether the team purposefully built the car away from him and closer to Verstappen. But what is 100% certain is that Verstappen is a generational talent that can adapt to any given car, and he certainly utilised this talent in order to secure the 2nd consecutive title in his career. That's something that Perez is not even close to, so if you're trying to show teeth to a type of driver like Verstappen, you better have the perfect drive in order to back up your words. Otherwise, you'd be sacked and replaced by someone who would be much more obedient than you. In this case, that would be Ricciardo. So what does the Australian have to say about this whole thing? Obviously, he's been around the sport for quite some time, and he isn't naive about this whole thing going in front of his eyes. And while he's trying to hide his excitement about potentially being back on a top-performing team, which was his #1 goal ever since he announced that he wouldn't race in 2023, sparkles could be seen in his eyes and his statement. Ricciardo spoke about him potentially replacing Perez in 2024 and whether this is in his contract, further adding, "A race seat for 2024 is not in my contract, but with time, I'll also get the answer as to whether I want to be back on the grid myself. Right now, I don't feel ready, but it's my decision." Many have speculated that Ricciardo has lost his joy for racing sports car, but that's far from the truth. Obviously, Ricciardo waits for the perfect moment to strike, and now that the waters have been churned with Red Bull, there's a lot of hope that we're going to see the Honey Badger strike again in the uniform that he was able to build a name for himself. But what does Perez have to say about this matter? Just like Ricciardo, it's obvious that he couldn't stay immune to all of the talks that are circulating about him being replaced, and when asked about this matter, the Mexican said, "I'm pretty relaxed. We live under a lot of pressure all the time. It doesn't change anything from my side. I think it's a great achievement from the team to have a driver like Daniel. He's going to contribute a lot to our team. He's a great guy. He's one of the guys I get on most with on the paddock. It's great to have Daniel in the team, and from my side, it doesn't change anything. We started our careers at a similar time, so we've known each other for a long time. I certainly get on with him." Well, it's going to be very interesting and a rather turbulent period ahead for Red Bull, and one guy that could capitalise heavily on this situation is Daniel Ricciardo. Whether we'll see the 8-time race winner again in action as a full-time racing driver, only time will tell. So, what do you think about Ricciardo potentially replacing Perez? Let us know in the comments down below.